let's start. We have everyone, correct? Good evening all, buenas noches y bienvenidos a todos a la reunión ordinaria en público de la Junta de Educación de las Escuelas Públicas de Dover. Welcome to the Dover Board of Education, our regular meeting, which is hereby called to order at 6:39 p.m. and is in compliance with the notice requirements of the law. One second, lost my place. Public notice was posted in the office of the Board of Education and communicated to the Municipal Court and the Daily Record on February 23rd, 2021. Due to the current public health emergency, this evening's meeting is being conducted as a virtual meeting. Instructions for accessing and participating in the virtual meeting were posted on the district website at dover-nj.org. If we could please stand up and join me in saluting our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you all. You may be seated. Mr. Minkowicz, may we have attendance roll call, please?
Yes, Ms. Catano.
Present.
Ms. Giraldo.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Ms. Mullen.
Here.
Ms. Nutting.
Here.
Ms. Ruiz.
Here.
Dr. Sainer.
Present.
Ms. Viveros.
Present.
Ms. Grisales.
Present. As the district continues to prepare for the end of the school year, the board continues to be impressed by the constant resiliency of our students and educators during this very traumatic and unusual academic year for all. In May, the board completed their volunteer duties via a hybrid model and will move to in-person meetings pending all CDC and state recommendations and the district's technical adjustments for our June regular meeting. We keep in mind all those that continue to be impacted by COVID-19, both medically, financially, and emotionally. We too keep in mind all of our students and staff that have been impacted by social injustices, both here in our nation and internationally or in their native countries. Mr. Miller, would you please remind the board of the focus of this meeting by reading our mission and vision statement, please?
Sure. Working together as a community, our mission is to welcome all and provide opportunities for our students in a safe and accepting learning environment to become creative, empathetic, resilient, and who choose to make an impact.
Thank you. Let's keep that in mind. Dr. McLaughlin, would you please introduce tonight's presentations?
Thank you. We have two presentations this evening, a presentation from our district auditor, and then a presentation from the Metropolitan Center for Research on Equity and the Transformation of Schools. We're going to begin with our auditor, and I'm going to ask Mr. Minkowicz if he would introduce the auditor to the board.
Yes, good evening, everyone. I'd like to introduce our auditor, Mr. Michael McGuire. Mr. McGuire's firm was new to Dover this year. So this was their first full audit of the school district. And go ahead, Mr. McGuire.
Thank you, Jim. Mike McGuire from Samuel Klein & Company. Yeah, our first year during COVID, which was made it a very interesting time to do auditing, I have to say. But we worked our way through it. I'm going to present the audit today. I'm going to read through the, I guess, the findings and the recommendations. And I'll talk about the surplus a little bit, and then I guess I'll be open to any questions that any of the board members or members of the public have. So we finished the audit before the statutory due line, and we came up with several findings that I want to go through. I'll start with the financial planning and accounting reporting area. The first recommendation that the district review the payroll procedures to ensure that correct amounts are remitted to all taxing agencies, that cash postings to the general ledger be recorded to the correct account and subfund. The contractual reimbursements be either anticipated as revenue when preparing the district's budget or recorded as miscellaneous revenue if they cannot be readily determined. that the district reference the Uniform Minimum Chart of Accounts for public schools or other available materials such as the budget guidelines for proper classifications of certain expenditures. That the district develop procedures to ensure negative encumbrances are not recorded in the district. That the bank reconciliations be reviewed to ensure they agree with the cash balances found in the general ledger. And finally, that the report of the treasurer and the board secretary be in agreement prior to presenting them to the board and the county executive. In the school service funds, we recommend that the financial activity of the school service funds be recorded in the general ledger and in its entirety. And that the cafeteria utilize purchase orders and have vouchers that have claimant signatures, authorization signatures, and receiving signatures prior to payment. With the student body activities, that all schools maintain formal cash receipts and disbursements journal with sub-accounts, preferably computerized. And I did note that management has begun a project to address this recommendation. And in fact, we had a class a few weeks ago on moving all the schools to QuickBooks, including the athletic, to make it easier for them to record the activity and be able to present it timely. And that the district develop policies, procedures to ensure that all expenditures from the student activity funds have proper approval and supporting documentation prior to processing and releasing payment. With the application for state school aid, that greater care be exercised when preparing the work papers to use to develop the ASSA report. And I'll talk about this in a little bit. There was a letter that I prepared and I sent to Vince Mastrocola from the state addressing this specific finding. And finally, with the facilities and capital, that the fixed assets report additions and deletions agree with the district's records. Does anybody want me to go over anything or discuss in a little more detail any of these recommendations?
Mr. Miller?
Yeah, I just have a question. With your findings, did your firm recommend some best practices that our business office can put into action to help us with our continuous improvement?
Well, I know Jim put together a corrective action plan, which we reviewed, and I reviewed that with him. They incorporate some best practices that they should use. A lot of it had to do with internal control, and it was a really strange year, not just because of COVID, but because you had basically 2 BAs during that time period. Jim came in while the audit was being done and had really nothing to do with the district. I know that there was an employee who was instrumental in recording a lot of the information. She went out just before the closeout. So, we understood and took into account that, some of these things may not have happened if it wasn't for this perfect storm of things that occurred, and including COVID. But I believe that Jim has put into place with the new accounting system and some new internal controls, the ability to negate and to remove a lot of these findings.
Oh, great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other questions from the board? Okay, thank
I
you
just
so
wanna-
much.
I just want to clarify one other thing too with the application for state school aid. I said that I sent the letter. Again, this is because of COVID. When we were doing the audit, we did the whole thing basically remotely. Part of what we do is we communicate with individuals who are in charge of the areas that we're auditing. In this case, we were dealing with emails back and forth, trying to get some of our findings resolved. And I guess because of communication errors, we didn't get them resolved, and they made the audit report. Subsequent to the audit, we actually came in and met with people who prepared the ASSA report, and basically being able to sit down with them and go over the work papers and articulate what we were looking for. We basically resolved all of the issues except for 3, and there were quite a few. I did put this in a letter to Vince Mastrocola to let him know that my belief was that if we were able to physically be in the district and sit down with the individual to go through it, most of those findings having to do with ASSA would not have made the audit report. And I know that there was a big push to try to get that resolved because this has been an issue in the past. And I know it reflects badly on the district because of that, but I wanted to let the state know that we did do some subsequent work on it. And really the findings all had to do with our inability to be physically at the location and to sit down and to, again, articulate what we were looking for with the individual so he could get it for us. Okay. And
Mr. McGuire,
yes.
if I may ask on that point, I appreciate you sending that letter over because it definitely does make the district look not in the best 100%. Could the audit not have been edited before submission? And if, why not?
Well, we did try to resolve the issues before we submitted the audit. Again, we were under a deadline of February 4th that we had to get it in. And I guess through the emails, the individual who we were dealing with basically concurred with what we were finding, that he couldn't find the backup or the documentation we needed in order to resolve it. I guess I don't want to say he felt bad, but he wanted to find out exactly what was going on. So that's why he arranged through Jim to have us come in to sit down with him afterwards. Again, because of the time constraint, and this was probably in April sometime, we sat down with him and went through what we were actually looking for. And then he was able to pull his records, and then we were able to find that documentation that we were missing. And I guess, again, because of emails and trying to articulate that through an email, he was just not able to gather the information we needed.
Can I just jump in here? And Mr. McGuire, we have not spoken, but I am involved in this situation because of the staff that are involved with what you're speaking about. Mm-hmm. And I just want to clarify for the board that our personnel had the data correct. The misinterpretation occurred when that data went with the auditor. So I don't want the board to think that our internal person did not have their data correct. His data was correct. His data.
Yeah. When I said when we went there and we were able to find the information, he did have the data. It's just that based on how the information was requested through emails, it didn't come to us, or it wasn't shown to where the information was in the work papers. So, and that's the reason why the letter went out, to make that clear that the information was there and available. It just wasn't in front of us, and we weren't able to gather the information through email what we were looking for.
Right.
So I tried to express that. I tried to express that to Vince, that it wasn't a fault of the district necessarily.
Right, and we did ask, just Ms. Grisales, we did have the same idea you had, as that there should be another report written, but Mr. McGuire did not. Exactly.
Well, and again, I spoke to Vince Mastrocola down at the state, who I deal with for all of our districts, and I expressed your, I guess, your concern about what happened, and wanting to issue another report, or to reissue the report. I guess he concurred with me that the report as it was fine. If the letter went out, it would go to the appropriate individuals so that they were aware that it didn't need, the report didn't need to be reissued. And again, because it wasn't a material financial mistake that needed to restate numbers, that really added to his conclusion that if we wrote a letter on behalf of the district expressing what we found, that would be sufficient.
Right. Thank you. Just to know, we aim for 100% or more. So, it is important for us to have, make sure that our auditors are really auditing us with the information that we have and the numbers. So I appreciate this clarification.
Yeah, you're very welcome. And again, I feel bad because I don't try to make recommendations or findings just to make findings. I use them as constructive ways of improving the district. And it's part of my job. So, this was, if I don't have to put a finding in, I wouldn't, not just for the sake of putting one in. I don't like to do that. So, I felt bad that, it came to that we actually had the information. And I'm the one that actually suggested, to Vince that we write something, at least notify the state, put them a notice that it wasn't the district's fault. It was just, we had the information, we just didn't know where to find it.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from other board members or administrators? Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. McGuire.
Oh, you're very welcome.
Okay. So moving to our next presentation, we are very happy to have with us tonight Mr. Matt Gonzalez, and he is from the Metropolitan Center for Research on Equity and the Transformation of Schools. We are engaging with the Metropolitan Center, which is based at NYU, to do work in our district next year in this very important area. And I am not going to rain on Mr. Gonzalez's parade. I'll let him explain what the planned actions are for this year and what the Metropolitan Center will be doing along with the District of Dover.
Thanks, everybody. Can you all hear me? Cool. Sorry, I'm coming to you all from the West Coast right now, so apologies. I'm in a hotel room and I have a colleague in the next room, but super happy to be here, and just apologies. I've been traveling all day, so just getting to sit down. I'll go do a quick introduction. I have like 3 slides, so like nothing nothing comprehensive.
I'm going to interrupt you, Mr. Gonzalez, just for a minute, because I think we have the wrong slide showing. So if our facilitator could utilize the presentation that Mr. Gonzalez had shared.
I saw it up there, so I know someone's on it. I'm seeing y'all up there. So
As with, us Zoomers now, we have to be patient, take a breath, and they will come.
Of course. I always tell people, if you're in a Zoom meeting and one thing doesn't mess up, then it's actually not a good Zoom meeting. So, got to have at least one technical difficulty.
One hiccup.
At least one.
Thank you.
My apologies.
It happens. You're a Zoomer.
For some reason, it's pulling the wrong presentation. Hold on one second.
Thank you all, public and everyone here, for your patience. Hopefully soon we won't have to deal with this.
Oh my goodness. Okay, let me try it this way.
Thank you for trying.
Oh, there we go.
Okay, it just didn't. I'm sorry, it didn't like Google. I was cross browsering. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, everyone. And so, I have a couple slides, and ultimately just wanted to walk through a little bit of what we've been proposing as a potential collaboration between NYU Metro Center and Dover Public Schools. So super excited to be here. Just a quick introduction. My name is Matt Gonzalez. I'm director of the Integration and Innovation Initiative at the NYU Metropolitan Center. We're a 40-plus-year-old research center that is a traditional research center at NYU, but we've really, since the birth of the center, certainly predating my life, have been really leading work across the country, certainly in New York City and the metro region, focused on equity and school transformation. And that looks in a lot of different ways, from curriculum teaching to policy to technical assistance work that we do. Over last summer, as with many organizations, understanding the kind of tide of where schools and communities were leaning, where conversations around anti-racism, where the work of racial equity needed to be led. That's been in our wheelhouse for many years. And so what we did was really rethink about our structure as an organization and how we can contribute to and support schools and districts in achieving their goals towards anti-racist policy, practice, beliefs, structures. And so our anti-racism initiative is actually a collaboration between my unit, which is as I said, the I3 unit, and then our Education, Justice, Research, and Organizing Collaborative, and then our Center for Strategic Solutions. All 3 of our units, again, do a variety of different ranges of work, from community organizing and support, working directly with parents and young people to develop policy, to prioritize equity agendas, to actually doing work directly with educators around culturally responsive and sustaining practices. Over the last year, we've been called to many other districts, currently in Oregon right now, supporting this district in a variety of issues around equity and school discipline policy. So we serve as advisors to a variety of initiatives, from districts to parents to schools to whomever really is calling for help. We collaborate with a bunch of different organizations across the country, in New York City and beyond, again, to really help think through what are the long-term and sustainable efforts towards anti-racism. We create materials, tools, resources. We are a research center, so we do produce research and very much will produce rapid response research for community groups, so that we're translating academic content to the layperson and to anyone who needs to understand what we're talking about. And then we do a variety of equity reviews, literature reviews, data analysis, all the stuff at a traditional research center. So that's kind of the scope of our work. You can go to the next slide. And so what we'd proposed was really two kind of pathways or opportunities for collaboration. So I'll say my kind of wheelhouse is really doing policy work with districts and doing a lot of training with educators. And then I think, for me more personally, is really engaging directly with young people in the design and development of policy. So just sharing an example of one proposal that we've laid out as a collaborative opportunity. I think many folks know that there's a lot of energy among young people in activism and anti-racism and climate justice and so many different areas. For us, it's really about how do we help elevate and amplify and help translate some of the brilliant ideas our young folks have into public policy, into priorities, into school policies and practices. That's for us is a very key element of ensuring that those who are directly impacted by racism in schools or inequality are the ones who are really designing their own kind of liberation and opportunities for equitable practices. And so the proposal we articulated for you all was to identify and convene a group of young people from the district that we can talk through what the ranges look like, but really to bring young folks together, provide some leadership training and coaching so that they're oriented around policy, anti-racism, again, or whatever the kind of however we want to collaboratively curate content and conversation. All of that is grounding towards really, again, getting young folks to think, to act as agents of change and policymakers, really empowering them to see themselves as folks who can make policy. Obviously, this requires school board support. This requires superintendent support, because if they write a report, which actually an example here, I'm showing you a report that we wrote with students from the New York City specialized high schools. These are 7 of our actually most segregated high schools in New York City. We took a number of students who were part of the most underrepresented communities and really co-constructed a report, which I'll drop a link in the, I don't actually think I can drop anything in the chat, but I'll make sure to share a link to the full report that we wrote. But, we were convened these young folks, did some grounding, some training, and then actually we're like, okay, what are the changes you need to make in your schools? And so we put together a series of recommendations from policy to teaching practices to centering student voice, again, really directed by young folks. We obviously offered a variety of frameworks for them to think about. But the goal would be here is to, again, identify and prioritize some leadership opportunities and development opportunities for young folks in the district. And then again, really give them a pathway and a platform to articulate what they believe, what they think needs to be done towards equity, towards racial justice, again, however they really define some of the key issues that are happening in the district. And so I think, given that, a lot of students are starting, schools are starting to reopen, we're starting to get to a new phase of what it means to be back in school in a lot of ways. I think there's so much opportunity for young people to help shape what those conversations look like. And the vehicle we tend to use is bringing them together. Again, that can be virtual, that can be in person, whatever really is consistent with the safety guidelines. But then really, again, finding ways to empower them and help them elevate the priorities that they think are necessary. And then thinking about what does long-term infrastructure look like for youth voice. We have traditional student councils and other student leadership opportunities. Those mechanisms tend to identify the students who are always on the student council and maybe the students who get better grades. That's great. We always want all students to have a voice, but actually what we know is that in a lot of situations where we're asking about policy and practice and change, students who actually experience, the brunt of educational inequality very rarely have a voice. Students with disabilities, students who don't have secure housing, students whose primary language isn't English, find it more difficult to find entry points into saying what they need to have happen. So our process and work is really about centering, the most marginalized in our systems to make sure that their voices are heard as well. So that's one kind of aspect of the proposal that we've laid out. You can go to the next slide, and I'm happy to take questions on all these. Just wanted to walk through a little bit of the scope. Go back one. So another aspect of the work we do, and apologies for this kind of not very thorough and detailed slide, but what we do is also do parent trainings, leadership trainings with school districts, with parent leadership groups, with educators. This is actually a body of work at our colleagues at EJ Rock, the Education Justice Research Organizing Collaborative, that we collaborate on. That's working directly with schools, districts, leadership teams. Again, it could really range on a variety of different priorities, policies. I think what we've thought about proposing was working with the school board as a collective to identify practices that are, centering racial equity, that are dismantling, white supremacy and white supremacy culture. I think what many of us know, even in spaces where we are primarily folks of color, we tend to still replicate and reinforce inequitable and racist practices, really at our own detriment. And so we do a lot of work with adults to really think through what are equitable approaches, what are multiracial and kind of collaborative approaches that again acknowledge that we all kind of breathe the air of white supremacy culture. And we also the antidotes to that are a lot of anti-racist practices. And so we do a lot of, trainings on racial microaggressions, or what we call racial aggressions, because there's nothing micro about them. We do trainings on intersectionality, and again, thinking about what are ways that we can use these lenses to help us do our work more effectively. Everything we do, which I'm giving you a general sense of how we do it, what we do, everything we do is very co-constructed and like curated with our partners. And so, I'm sharing some examples of topics and workshops and part of a series that we've worked on with a number of schools and a number of different districts. But what we, none of our workshop series ever look the same. They're always going the same trajectory, right? But again, really depending on the needs, the experiences, the priorities, and we really are committed to collaborative relationships with our partners so that whatever we're doing together is, useful and is sustainable and is functional for you all to move forward. And so, just to recap, we really want to partner with you all, and I would love to partner with you all on really elevating, prioritizing youth voices in the district and elevating and again, centering conversations and policy on young people. And then again, have an opportunity to partner with the leadership of the district to think about what are anti-racist practices that you all and we all can implement as district leaders, and how can that filter down across the school district. So I'll pause there and open it up if there's any questions from folks. I see a question.
Thank you. I don't see everyone, so please go ahead. I see Ms. Ruiz. Thank you. Yep, go ahead, Ms. Ruiz. I don't see any other hands.
Thank you, Ms. Gonzalez, and thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Now I don't see your name. That's your name, right, Mr. Gonzalez?
You can call me Matt, but yeah.
Thanks, Matt. I try to maintain formality on the board.
I try not to be formal, but I appreciate you.
Yes, for different reasons, but I'll let you know all about my reasons another time. Thank you so much. the fact that the Board of Education has a presentation where the term white supremacy is used is revolutionary for us. So thank you for naming it. I love what I'm hearing about student-led policy change in our district. I love your proposal to implement anti-racism practices in our district. You're in luck. If your proposal is accepted, you will have a great number of advocates among our youth, advocates for justice. Among our student population, our students have led walkouts for environmental justice. Our students have led marches with the Black Lives Matter movement. Our students have led demonstrations for immigrant rights, and even a rally for the right to engage in school sports during the pandemic, which you can imagine was quite a challenging for our district. We are a working class community, a low income district, a highly segregated district. Last I saw, I think our white population was 6%, and the majority of our students are either Latin American or of Latin American descent. So certainly we have plenty to work with here, given your proposal. I'm concerned with anti-racism education for our staff and our board, this Board of Education, and our community. We are working to become a school community, and our students are often very well versed, much better than we adults are, in LGBTQIA rights, in dismantling white supremacy, in racialized aggressions, in intersectionality, in ways that those of us who are past our teenage years just aren't. Those words are some of the words I just named are foreign for some members of our community. So while of course we want student-led policy change proposals, what does your proposal offer for our staff and adult community members? And I know that anti-racism work is not quick, but the need is quick, and this has been centuries coming. So I kind of want quick. So, how can you work on that?
Yeah, so just thanks for kind of acknowledging, like, just to give you all a, clarity about us. We don't sugarcoat things, as an organization, as an institution. We are a Black-led organization. All of our directors and leadership are folks of color, besides a couple of other folks. And so the work that we do is very much explicitly centered on racial equity and racial justice. That just to, let y'all know who you're dealing with, right? Like, that's how we roll. In terms of, kind of the impact and the opportunity to engage educators, the proposal I laid out kind of centers some work around youth, because that's really an entry point that I focus a lot on, and then some parent focused or kind of like adult focused work. What we didn't do was actually write in space for work with educators. We do a bunch of work with educators at Metro Center, and would very much happily love to be in conversation about that. I think, just to be very frank, in terms of like the context of like, a budget, we wouldn't actually be able to like realistically provide the variety of different aspects you all are looking for within like the constraints of like the amount of money that we talked about. So that just would be the one constraint. In terms of what we do with educators, there's a wide range of work that gets done. We work with our Center for Strategic Solutions, does leadership training, specifically anti-racist leadership training with educators. That's not easy work, that's hard work, right? I'm a former special educator. And so like I understand like how I struggled to like center this work while I was in the classroom and to center it with my principal. But we do really effective work with districts across the country, with district leadership. We do parent training. We have a series called Critically Conscious Educators Rising, which brings together cohorts of educators actually from across the country to talk about, to engage in with other educators in, conversations and practicum-based work around anti-racism. There's a lot of amazing resources out there right now that have just developed over the last year. Also, I know just from talking to my friends who are in the classroom, they're just overwhelmed by things, and so would certainly be happy to talk in more detail and actually pull in some of our colleagues who do that work more explicitly. But I think, just to be very frank, we didn't engage that aspect. I think the hope here is that we could find entry points for some collaboration. Y'all could be like, we like you guys, let's do more, and we would love to propose a wider range of collaboration that could happen. But certainly, yeah, that's not included in the work that we do. But certainly would love to think about how do we connect dots, because again, for me, this work, as you said, like we're thinking about intersectionality. It's not just like intersectional identities, it's actually intersectional work and intersectional policy, and making sure that this thing that's happening with youth is not disconnected from the work that's happening with educators. And so our work is really about alignment and coherence. And so would love to kind of be engaged in the long-term conversation with you all about how that works.
And I'm just going to interject and emphasize something that Matt said early on in his presentation. The engagement with the NYU Metro Center would be long-term and sustained. So this is the first element. And we think any kind of real change has to be long-term and sustained. And it really was both Matt and Richard Gray, who's been a part of our conversations, have talked about the fact that basing this on students first and hearing their voices first is the right place to start, with a good, robust initial effort of training at the governance and administrative level, so that we begin with children's voices and with those who lead us. But this is meant not to be a 21, 22 one and done effort, but one first step in a long path of what we know is meaningful and needed work.
Thank you. Ms. Catano?
Mr. Gonzalez, thank you so much for coming and presenting. It was a great presentation. Now, during the slide that you actually put all the programs that you guys offered, I didn't see anything about unconscious bias or implicit bias, and this is something that is very common. Will you guys will be covering that at some point?
Wonderful question. And yeah, thank you. Yeah, so what I would say is, a lot of actually, thinking of how we rolled out our implicit bias training here in New York City, the way we think about that is actually that's like kind of a baseline, tends to be a baseline, a starting point for folks. What we're offering, I think, really kind of grounds everyone in that, but actually, again, really leaning into understanding the implicit bias, racial is connected to racial bias and the racial hierarchies in our society. And so actually, part of like grounding our work in the white supremacy culture work and framework is actually an acknowledgement that we actually all hold a lot of bias. So I'll just to acknowledge that we very much ground the conversation in bias, but are explicit about the ways that it shows up in the ways that our society is organized based on race and class. And so the conversation we have is always about the various forms of oppression that we all experience. Like, I walk around New York City as a man, never really thinking about my body like being unsafe, right? And that in itself is a little privilege that I have as a person who identifies as a man. And so we really try to make sure that conversation we're having is grounded in the various contexts that bias can manifest. So implicit bias is one of those, but we actually try to cut it up in a more complicated structure. But very much, yeah, that's very much like part of the grounding of the conversation. So thanks for that question.
Great. I am too very emotional about having you here, Mr. Gonzalez. I am a product of Dover. So it is very nice to see something that I would have liked to take advantage of as a kid. But I'm very happy that our kids now can take advantage of this. And like Ms. Roy said, you're gonna find, if everything works out and we could afford you and we could do whatever, we can to bring this to our kids, you're going to find an awesome group of kids that are fighters and are resilient. I started the meeting today talking about their resiliency, and our educators are as well. And I will not be surprised if they follow suit with kind of what our kids are going to be teaching us.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I'll just say, as Superintendent McLaughlin said, like for us, like having young folks be the North Star of a lot of this is really powerful. I mean, but I think part of, his point about the need for support through the governance structures, I've helped students in New York City write the most, dynamic and progressive policy we've seen in a long time around school segregation, around the various issues we have in the city that you all may, recognize as well. When we have, we've had written beautiful policy briefs and written really amazing reports and said, here's 80 recommendations you should implement tomorrow or the next day or now. And when we've had leadership that's been like, nah, no thanks, that in itself, I think, undermines all this work. And so I think part of it is like trying to align making sure young folks are at the center of this conversation and driving it forward. But then, that doesn't mean adults, we don't have a responsibility, right? We all have to gather around, uplift them and support them. And so I think part of it is like, how do we create this like symbiotic relationship between our youth, our leader, our, school district governance leaders, our educators, so that they're all actually going in the right direction together. But young folks are like really, they're pointing in the direction that we need to go, because actually they're always going to know where we need to go. And I think we're always going to go where we're comfortable going. And so that's why we really challenge ourselves to center young folks in these conversations, even when it can be challenging and they can say wild things. But, that's actually, we need kind of wild thinking right now, right? We can't be just going back to the same playbook.
Correct. It takes a village, right? We talked about it takes a village, so exciting. Any other board members? Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Gonzalez again. Dr. McLaughlin?
Yeah, I will, I believe superintendent team has some of the samples of work, so you all can see it more than a slide, but I'm happy to just share the last report that we wrote. And actually I'm in Oregon right now to meet with a group of students here, and I don't know that we'll have anything to share with you all, but we can certainly talk a little bit about the work and what it's looked like. But would love to collaborate with you all. I'm across the country now, obviously want to do this work closer to home if I can. So yeah, just an honor to be here, and I appreciate you all.
And I do want to confirm with the board that we have collaborated with the NYU Metro Center on a first-year proposal. So it's not an unknown. We wanted the board to hear though first before we presented that proposal, so there was a context for it. And we believe it's a fairly significant investment, but it's an important one. So we have to put our resources where they are needed. And so we will be presenting that to the board. Thank you, Mr. Gonzalez. Thank you. Please also pass our thanks on to Richard. We appreciate all the work that you've done, the many meetings that you've had with Mr. Rigliano and myself, and we look forward to working with you.
Our pleasure. Richard's next door in the next hotel room, so I'll let him know. I appreciate you all.
Thank you. Be safe over there on that West Coast.
We sure will. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Okay, we will move then to our public comment section. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters. To ensure fair and orderly expression of such comment, each statement shall be held to a time period of 3 minutes. Public comments limited to items on this agenda should be entertained for approximately 30 minutes upon the discretion of the presiding officer. Since this is a virtual meeting occurring during the COVID-19 shutdown, public comment has been solicited through the Google form on the district website at dover-nj.org. Please understand that public comment portions of our agenda are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather they are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board may or may not respond to public comments. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of rights of others when providing comments. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students or employees. Please be advised that you are commenting at your own risk. Any public comments that are directed at a particular individual or individuals could subject you to legal liability for defamation. Do we have any attendees that have their hands raised?
No hands raised.
I see 3 attendees and no hands raised. Okay. Mr. Minkowicz, when we move to the Google form, please, and comments there.
No, I don't see any.
Okay, perfect. With no further acknowledgement of comments, I will close the public comment section. And we will move to the approval of, wait, I see a hand. Yes, Ms. Ruiz.
I'm just going to excuse myself for just a few moments.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can hear you. Okay,
I'm
great.
okay.
Thank you.
I'm okay. Just
Thank
a few
you.
moments, be right back.
No problem. Okay. So if we move forward then with the approval of minutes. And is there a motion on the table to approve April 27 regular and executive session? Ms. Mulling has moved. May we have a second, please? Ms. Catanos, I saw your hand. Thank you very much. Is there any questions, comments about the minutes? None that I see. Perfect. May we have roll call, Mr. Minkowitz, please?
Ms. Catano,
Yes.
Ms. Geraldo,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Nutting,
Yes.
Dr. Sainer,
Yes.
Ms. Viveros,
Yes.
and Ms. Ruiz is not here, right? No.
Correct, she stepped away.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Yes. Okay, perfect. Does the motion carry? Yes, we're correct?
Yeah.
Okay, communications. The board received communication from community member, Ms. Sue Shower, clarifying her April public comment. And I believe that is all I had on my list. Does any other board member or administrator have any communications intended for the full board? None? Okay. I have administrative reports. Dr. McLaughlin, if you may lead those, please.
Thank you. Good evening. In keeping with the Board of Education's decision to resume in-person meetings effective for our June 15th Board of Education meeting, I would like to share some details with our school community in advance. In addition to the presence of our board members and our central administration, the Dover High School cafeteria, where our June meeting will be held, will accommodate 70 individuals from the public while still maintaining a 6-foot distance. This will allow ample room for the typical in-person audience size, and at the same time allow for a much larger than typical audience should the meeting be highly attended. We continue to plan to honor our Educators of the Year and our district retirees at that meeting, and room for 70 individuals should allow for that as well. It is important to note that a greeter will be at the main entrance of the high school to keep count of the participants, and should for some reason attendees reach 70, no additional individuals will be permitted into the public meeting room in the interest of maintaining a safe indoor distance for all those present. All attendees, including the board and the public, will be asked to wear a face mask for the duration of the meeting. Attendees will be asked to sign in as they enter school, and that is for the purpose of potential contact tracing. Our June meeting will be live streamed, as was our past practice for in-person meetings. And for that reason, we have contracted with a third party who has been arranged for the purpose of live streaming due to the complexity of capturing both sound and video over a much larger physical space than we would typically have. Since the board is returning to an in-person meeting, the emergency measures that we've been utilizing, such as the Zoom webinar broadcast and Google Forms for public comment, they will be discontinued, effective for the June meeting. Yesterday, during the governor's press conference, Governor Murphy indicated that the executive order from last August the 13th, which was executive order number 175, which has allowed school districts to provide remote instruction under certain circumstances during the 2021 academic year, will expire at the end of the school year. So that particular executive order will expire with the end of this school year. Through this action, he indicated that the state was declaring that all students will be back in school for full-time in-person instruction come the start of the 21-22 school year. He further shared that his announcement also includes the removal of the full-time remote learning option for families. He indicated that next year parents will not be enabled to broad scale opt their child out of in-person instruction, as was allowed during this school year. I have been very specific in indicating that this was the governor's statement, so that that these are not local decisions, but these are being shared with us at a state level. No further details have yet been shared by the state with school districts. I'm only reporting information that was shared at the governor's press conference. A new safe return plan has been requested from every school district in New Jersey to share details of how students will return safely to school. Our leadership team is in the process of developing that plan, and it will be released to our community during the month of June. Plans have been established for graduations of both our Dover High School and Dover Middle School, and letters providing details for the ceremonies, which both will be held at Hamilton Field, will be sent to parents this week and also posted on the website. And we are very excited to once again have in-person graduation and promotion for our 8th graders. All school districts were recently made aware that a new round of ESSER's funding will be forthcoming, and details regarding ESSER 3 funds will be shared once they become available from the state. Effective next week, Dover High School will reduce its cohorts from 4 to 2, meaning that students will move from having 1 day of instruction at the high school to having 2 days of instruction. And we look forward to seeing our high school students on a more frequent basis for the closing weeks of school. And that concludes my report.
Thank you, Dr. McLaughlin. Mr. Vigliano?
Good evening. On the agenda for approval tonight is the abolishment of the multimedia design course. So I wanted to talk to the board about that. We don't generally abolish courses. But through careful evaluation of our curriculum, our standards, and our programs, we were able to identify some redundancy within this particular course and the Intro to Programming course. With this abolishment, we're now able to offer more robotics sections, more cybersecurity, and also more sections of Intro to Programming. All of these additional sections will assist our guidance department to have more popular courses to offer our students as they begin to schedule. This is the very beginning of us looking forward to developing more courses and more pathways and opportunities in this particular area for our students. This week, summer program letters will be released to students and parents for participation in our expanded summer learning program. This summer, we're having a 5-week kindergarten through 12th grade summer learning program. We are focusing on students who did not achieve as expected during the regular school year. This is a chance for those particular students to receive direct live instruction and recoup some of the learning loss from this extraordinary year. Parents will be notified and asked to return the registration form to save a spot for their child in the program. This is all being funded through our ESSER's 2 grant monies. There's a lot of ESSER's money, as Dr. McLaughlin said in his report, but this one in particular is only the ESSER 2 funds.
Can you tell us the acronym? What does that mean?
Oh, geez.
Or someone, education, well, for a little later then, please let us know what that is.
I don't know if Dr. McLaughlin or Mr. Minkowitz knows the exact.
And actually, it's funny because the ESSER funds also have a totally different name
Yeah.
that is referred to by. But we'll get you all the names for the acronyms.
And this concludes my report.
Thank you. That was a great one.
Ms.
Yes, Ms. Reese.
I think it's I just, not the acronym, but is this the funding through COVID, the Educational Stabilization Fund, through the CARES Act?
I think so.
Yes, yes.
Well, CARES is separate though. Yeah, CARES is.
Yeah, CARES was kind of like ESSER's 1, and then there was ESSER's 2, and then so they're not referring to it as CARES, but I think it all does come through the CARES Act. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Minkowitz.
Hi, everybody. The New Jersey School Board's November election kit is posted online at the district website. We got a notice from school boards the other day that it was available. The election will be held this year on November 2nd. And the deadline for submitting petitions is 4 o'clock on July 26th. We have 3 open positions for 3-year terms. So there's three full terms available for Dover. The ethics disclosure statements, holy cow, that was a lot of struggle for a lot of people. And it's not just us, it was everybody. There's still, I just checked right before the meeting tonight, there's still 5 under review. Many people, administrators, board members had submitted, resubmitted, and it was just for silly things, not putting none or not putting not applicable in every section. Where I guess the problem was that wasn't in the instructions. So nobody knew to do that until they came back rejected with the notes that it had to be done. So anyway, keeping my fingers crossed that those 4 or 5 out there finally get approved. Next, the auditor mentioned that we did training for QuickBooks, the school secretaries and principals last week. So that QuickBooks is in cloud and the auditor is loading our balances in there for us so that we get an accurate start. So he's doing that this week. On this evening's agenda, another item is approval of the Victory Gardens transportation routes. And that was $390,000 for next year. We negotiated, Patty, our transportation supervisor, negotiated that price with Roxbury, and we're going to go with Roxbury next year. The current proposal for 2021 was $388,276, so it's nominal increase, a couple $1,000s. The agreement's called a host joiner contract. Someone had a question, what does that mean, host joiner? And that's just terminology in administrative code for transportation. And I looked up the code and it says, in quotes, the host is the district providing the transportation, which in this case would be Roxbury, and the joiner is the district receiving the transportation. And in this case, that's Dover. And on the last note, one of the routes is a late run, and that late run is for Victory Gardens. It leads to high school about 3:35 p.m. And that's it for my report.
Great. Thank you all administrators for such wonderful reports. It's great to hear all of the work that's happening behind the scenes, right? Okay, may we move forward with Board of Education reports. We have a Morris County Education Services Commission, Mr. Miller.
Yes, I attended the meeting on the 12th of May. The Education Services Commission is going to be closing out their direct transportation services that they used to provide. They're currently going to post all the buses they own for sale on an NJASBO website. And any buses that are remaining, they're going to work through the Hunterdon ESC cooperative to handle the sale of the remaining buses. So I think based on what happened with the pandemic, they lost all those bus routes and it just is not a sustainable model right now. So, and that concludes my report from the year.
Thank you, Mr. Miller. What sad news.
Yeah.
Ms. Ruiz, legislative report, please.
Thank you, Ms. Grisales. This legislative session has seen 3 new laws that impact education. The first is on bias training and requires the panel of arbitrators maintained by the Department of Education. Sorry, I'm trying to make my notes bigger. Okay, to receive cultural diversity and bias training to assist them in carrying out conduct hearings. The intent of the law is to educate arbitrators in ways in which bias and prejudice are harmful to all members of the school community and help them better recognize when such acts are occurring. The second was a law on student rights, and it deems education institutions ineligible for state funding if they require students to sign enrollment contracts that include forced arbitration, or other clauses that require students to waive their rights to participate in a class action lawsuit. The third is regarding teacher recruitment, and it creates the alternative route. It's the alternate route interstate reciprocity pilot program. And under this program, the State Board of Examiners is authorized to issue a certificate of eligibility to teaching candidates, including alternate route candidates who hold the equivalent of a certificate of eligibility or provisional certificate from another state. In addition, selected educators preparation programs would accept certain out-of-state candidates who have not yet completed an approved educator preparation program.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz. Ms. Nutting, do you have an update on the Morris County and JSBA meeting?
Yes, I do. The meeting was held on May 13th. Myself, Ms. Grisales, Dr. Sainer were also present, and I believe Ms. Mullen was also there, and Mr. Miller. I thought I saw yourself there. They had Dr. Timothy Burnell there, and he was congratulating, our Morris County School Board officers, and they mentioned it was the first year for the Unsung Heroes Award. They did touch on that. They also had, I'm sorry, I have a lot of notes that I'm trying to make sure I get to everything, because Ms. Ruiz did speak of some of the legislation that they did speak of. They also had a guest speaker, Nancy Kishlin. She was talking about our students and talking about how school violence and the lockdowns and what are the verbiage that we use when we talk to our when they talk to the students, and what our parents say to our students when they come home, what teachers say after they've gone through this lockdown. What are the words, knowing that some students are socially, emotionally affected by just saying, hey, we're going to do this, versus saying it's a drill and letting them know the difference and how to react and what you should do. Because normally in a situation that you prepare for, sometimes it doesn't always necessarily mean that you're prepared for that situation when it does occur. Actions do change. So she did ask us about that, and it was very interesting on how she was talking about that. And we also have some now certified board members on our board, Ms. Ruiz and Dr. Sainer and I was about to say Dr. Rosales. Mrs. Grisales are all certified board members, so they did introduce them at that meeting. So congratulations. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Was also new member training there? Was there anyone acknowledged on our end with that? I don't want to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Okay. I know it's not on the agenda, but typically we ask for reports here for the Mine Hill contract and the anti-racism. So Dr. Sainer, Dr. McLaughlin, do you have any updates for those two? Those ad hoc committees that.
I can mention that the Mine Hill ad hoc committee, that the Dover ad hoc committee has completed its review of some proposed contract changes, and that we are in the process of arranging a meeting with Mine Hill to discuss those.
Thank you. Dr. Sainer, do you have any?
I have no report. We have not met.
Perfect. Okay. If we move to the administrative approvals, is there a motion? Hold on a second, I have some background noise. Sorry, hearing books on audio is not as quiet as actually reading them. So administrative approvals, is there a motion from A through, I believe, B? I see Ms. all the way down to C. I see Ms. Giraldo raised her hand. Is there a second? Ms. Viveros, thank you. Is there any board discussion or questions about these items? No? All right, Mr. Minkowitz, may we have a roll call, please?
Ms. Catano,
Yes.
Ms. Giraldo,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Mon,
Yes.
Ms. Nutting,
Yes.
Ms. Ruiz,
Yes.
Dr. Sainer,
Yes.
Ms. Viveros,
Yes.
Ms. Grisales.
Yes. Perfect. I know the agenda says Ms. Mullen will lead a personnel, but we're having a switch moving forward. If Ms. Giraldo can lead the personnel items, please.
Yes, so please bear with me as it is my first time.
You got this, you got this.
I so move upon the recommendation of the superintendent, the board approves the following personnel resolutions, A through, I believe it's just B. And some notable notations here on the bottom. There are 2 certified staff appointments. We are getting a new PE and health and a new bilingual grade 1 teacher.
Perfect. So Ms. Giraldo, thank you for the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
All right, Ms. Mullen, I saw first. Is there a question, comments regarding these items from board members? Yes, Dr. Sainer.
Hi, I had some questions about the 10-month secretary positions that we are abolishing. What are the salaries for these 12-month positions commensurate with the increase in work that those employees will be doing?
Yes, we will be moving, as you mentioned, the reason we're abolishing those positions is because we're establishing 12-month positions, full-time 12-month positions, and individuals who receive that at a level that we are paying our 12-month secretaries at versus 10-month.
Okay, and can you tell me what will happen to the personnel currently in these 10-month positions?
Personnel are invited to apply, and I don't want to get too specific about the people who are there. However, there are positions available for those individuals should they choose to request them.
Okay, and one last question, do with the change or the new position, the new 12-month position, do the job responsibilities change at all?
No, it is basically the same focused job, but throughout the summer.
Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments, Mr. Minkowitz, may we have roll call, please?
Ms. Catano,
Yes.
Ms. Giraldo,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Mon,
Yes. Yes.
Ms. Nutting,
Yes.
Ms. Ruiz,
Yes.
Dr. Sainer,
Yes.
Ms. Viveros,
Yes.
Ms. Grisales.
Yes. Ms. Catano, may you lead negotiations update, please?
Thank you. We met on May 13, and I'm going to be providing you with the status of the negotiations. The contract between the Dover Board of Education and the Dover Education Association expired on June 30th, 2020. The board and the association began meeting in the spring of 2020 to negotiate a successor to that agreement. Agreement has been reached on a number of items. Some issues remain to be resolved. The board is willing to continue to negotiate in good faith and does not oppose the association's recent decision to seek the assistance of a state-appointed mediator. Mediation is not unusual, either in Dover or in the state. Generally, nearly a third of all contract negotiations in mediation. It is not failure, rather it is provided for in the law to assist the parties in doing something they have been unable to accomplish on their own. There is no cost to the district for the mediator, and they are assigned randomly by the state. The mediator cannot force a settlement on the parties Their sole purpose is to use their experience and overall knowledge to assist the board and association in finding a settlement that is acceptable to both of them. A mediator was recently appointed, and we are looking forward to the initial mediation section on June 9th. The board certainly appreciates the work done by our staff. The inability to reach an agreement is not a reflection of the board's opinion of the association membership, but is the result of sincerely held position on both sides that have made settlement difficult. Throughout the negotiations, the needs of our students and the district's educational program are the forefront of the board's priorities. The board's negotiations committee brought forward detailed proposals in a good faith attempt to reach a settlement that is fair to all the district's stakeholders. We have made numerous of modifications to the board's position in an effort to reach common ground with the association. So far, this has not been successful. Perhaps the mediator can help the parties reach a solution we have been unable to reach ourselves. In our judgment, a settlement must acknowledge the educational needs of our students, the tax burden imposed on our community, likely future state aid amounts, the financial needs of our employees, and the managerial requirements of our administration to run a successful and efficient school district while being fair to the association. The board is hopeful that the calm and productive atmosphere that has characterized these negotiations so far will continue so that the process can move forward without any undue disruption while the parties continue to negotiate in good faith to resolve the remaining issues. We also want to make clear that while the association had expired, the staff is not working without a contract. No terms and conditions in the expired agreement can be changed until a new agreement is reached. A staff member continue to enjoy all of the rights, benefits, and protections to which they were entitled under the expired agreement. In fact, teachers who were not at the top of the salary guide even received salary increases this school year in accordance with the provisions of the expired contract. In the end, the board and the DEA have always reached agreement that have met the needs of our students, our community, and the DEA members. We have no doubt that we will do it again. We will do it again. That will conclude my report.
Thank you, Ms. Catano.
Ms. Grisales, I need to interrupt with a point of order, if I may.
Okay, what is your point of order?
I have, we don't, of course, use our cell phones while we're in a meeting, but I did receive a message from a community member explaining that they can't get into our meeting. I'll just read it. It says, sorry to interrupt, but the Zoom passcode on the website says 775209 and it doesn't work. It actually seems too short. I looked around, I don't see the passcode listed anywhere else. Do you happen to know what it is? I don't happen to know what it is, and I would, one, ask what it is and ask permission from the board to respond to the community member with that passcode, since they're not here, so they can't hear us say it, or maybe the administration can update the website with the correct password or passcode if it is in fact incorrect.
That is actually the correct passcode. I just pulled it up from the Zoom meeting. It is 775209. But they shouldn't need the passcode if they click on the direct link.
And board members, are you okay with Ms. Ruiz responding directly there? I think it would be quicker than the administration updating it. Yes, everyone's nodding. Any opposed? Okay. Please, Ms. Ruiz, answer that. Thank you for the point of order. Okay, thank you, Ms. Catano, if I didn't. And Ms. Nutting, curriculum and co-curricular, please.
Yes, for curriculum, we met on May 11th. Ms. Gensinger joined us and we talked about World History Grade 11 and World History Grade 7, and the update including the person's disabilities in the curriculum with more detail during the timeline throughout history. While Ms. Gensinger was there, we also talked about civic instructions and how, with the events of the Capitol and the climate of our country in the past couple of months, what were the results of what was said to our teachers and how to approach it for our students. To put it together, it was stick with the truth, stick with what's going on, what's being said as far as your history and what's stated and the facts of everything. And Ms. Gensinger did give them, resources to look at and help them with on how to communicate with their students at all grade levels. Access testing, the state has canceled the testing for our students, but there was still ongoing testing for ELL and special education students. So that was also going, and there was also a SPURT program that is a free program to help address the behavioral health concerns in our, adolescents, to basically assess students prior to it becoming an issue of leading them down the road of drugs or alcohol abuse. So it's not, as my understanding, and Mr. Briano, if you wouldn't mind helping me out, from my understanding, it was basically an assessment that the counselors are going to use, not for every single high school student, but just students that are at risk that have been brought to their attention. Is this test being used, correct?
With parent consent, and it's actually a screening tool.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And also we, like Mr. Briano talked about, the abolishment of the multimedia design. So that was already spoken about. And there's a new computer science initiative that the governor has announced that we are looking at, and hopefully we will have it be going forward with all of that information and more information to come in the future. And that concludes my report. And I would like to make a motion for the board to approve the following 1 through 11.
Perfect. Thank you, Ms. Nutting, for the motion. Mr. Miller, is that a second? Perfect. Is there questions, comments regarding this section? I see Dr. Sainer.
I have a question regarding the contract with the Lake Drive School. The contract is dated 4/14 of this year, but it runs through November 2nd of 2020 through the end 6/25 of 21. Can you just explain why we're approving this now?
Sure. This is an IEP-driven area. This is for a student who's already placed, but related services were added. So we do, when those things happen, we do authorize that the services begin right away. And typically that runs, through the next cycle of IEP.
So it's a modification of a current contract?
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, Ms. Mullen.
I just have a quick question on the revised curricula for social studies, grade 7 and world history culture. I saw the changes and I know why the changes were made. Will they eventually be transferred or recreated in our new format? Okay.
Yes, we have to do a considerable amount of curriculum rewriting, and the state actually originally all the new standards and the curriculum affected by those new standards would have been due in September, but now they've given us a year extension on that, the whole state. So this revision was complete, and then we actually have to rewrite them anyway. So we didn't, put it into the new Atlas program.
Okay. Thank you. We have a motion and we have a second. Mr. Minkowicz, may you please lead us on roll call?
Ms. Catano,
Yes.
Ms. Giraldo,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Mullen, Ms. Nutting,
Yes.
Ms. Ruiz,
Yes.
Dr. Sainer,
Yes.
Ms. Viveros,
Yes.
Ms. Grisales.
Yes. Mr. Miller, Community Relations, please.
Thank you. The Community Relations Committee met on May 4th. We discussed the Daily Record article that had the headline, "Faulty Data, Dover Made It into the Top 100 New Jersey Schools List by Mistake, Superintendent Says." And we just wanted to be able to mention that the reporter had called Dr. McLaughlin for something else. And just in that conversation, it was unfortunate that the author presented such a negative title when in fact should have waited on that article, waiting for the numbers to be verified with US News and World Report. So we just wanted to put that clarification out there that that was not the intended story that the reporter decided to print when they originally called Dr. McLaughlin. We also discussed the budget presentation. And as part of our discussion, we would love to see the presentation not combined with a regular board meeting next year, only so that you can really focus more on presenting to the community some of the great programs that they support, through the budget. And we also discussed if the budget numbers could be compared with previous years so the public can better understand the impacts. And that was just some of the comments that members had received from the community at large. We also discussed the transition from our virtual board to in-person, which Dr. McLaughlin already talked about. And we also briefly discussed the fact that in the near future, the Academy Street School would be celebrating 100th anniversary. So I guess there'll hopefully be some preparation for that in the near future. Ms. Giraldo, could you report on Connecting Dover?
Yes, thank you. So there were 4 very good presentations that were presented to the group. One of the first ones was there was a representative from CARES who was informing us that there is a recovery support center now here in Dover that is operating part-time. This is huge for us. It's one of the first ones that we've had, and they focus really much on helping those who are impacted by recovery or people who know somebody who's going through recovery. It could be your family member, a friend, somebody you know. You can go here and get any type of help. They'll try to acquire the help that you are looking for. And some examples of that could be some Narcan training, Narcan kits, life skills trainings, which I think could be really helpful. We also, I'm so sorry. If you would like some more information on this, so they do have a website, which is preventioniskey.org. All their information is on there and you'll be able to see the different places that they might have. They do, I believe, and I might be wrong about this, I believe they have a center in Rockaway that is full-time. So they are there from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. Monday to Friday, as opposed to Dover, which I believe is only open 3 days a week on a part-time basis. We also had a representative from Trans Options, and I believe this month in mid-May, we weren't given an exact date, but in around mid-May, they are starting a Street Smart campaign, and it's very geared towards drivers in our area and making sure that we're looking out for pedestrians and, driving slower and really paying attention to our surroundings. So we should be seeing some flyers and some posters coming up around, and we should be maybe seeing some ads, some commercials that are going to be in our area for this campaign. And I think one of the better presentations that I did see was that Girl Scouts has actually been funded a grant for 100 girls in Dover specifically. So I think that's amazing for the girls in our town, which would be so amazing. They didn't give too much information, but I do believe that they have more information now available to the public. But they do have it's a 6-week program that should be starting in a couple days. It's around mid-May that should be starting, but they do have funding for a lot of our girls to be able to partake in such a wonderful program.
Thank you, Mr. Aldo. Yeah, it's good news. We need more scouts all the way around. The next thing that we worked on is the communication and community relations action plan, which was part of our board goals that we worked with the administration. One of the things we decided to do is rename the action plan. Instead, we're calling it a communications and community relations focus areas for 2021 and 2022. And if we could, if the facilitator could put that, display that screen so that I can explain. Almost. Thank you. So the idea with this focus area emphasis is to be able to communicate to the community some of the key initiatives and strategies that the district is going to focus in on for the coming school year. So we've centered on four focus areas: digital platform strategies, partnerships and networks, key district messages, district and building level focus. So the idea of this this focus area communication is that this would be published on the district website at the beginning of each school year, and the administration's normal process for planning would help to feed this, so all of these focus areas could be communicated to the community. So in a lot of cases, it's talking about how they're going to communicate it, or it's talking about, you know, what the focus and what they're going to do. The actual plan and details of the execution is up to the administration, but this just informs the community that these things are focus areas that are going to be executed by the district. So under digital platform strategies, website enhancements, that's something that's ongoing, always trying to put the right amount of information out there for the public, keeping it fresh and insightful. Another area is to enhance the mass notification system, which is really to create and update district guidelines and best practices for notifications, email, text, and phone. Another area is social media, and as the district tries to increase family engagement and excitement through greater focus, visibility on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and other social media platforms, and also to seek stakeholder feedback to leverage some digital feedback opportunities such as online surveys and social media analytics or other communications channels to gain insight and into school relationships, climate, family engagement, and barriers to engagement. So all very important things to keep the community engaged. And then under partnerships and networks, creating focus groups that would meet regularly to engage stakeholders face-to-face, to dialogue with respect to the district and school communication, information, strengths, parent concerns, and questions. And certainly community partnerships, which we have a lot of those that are reported throughout the year, in which we would list here some of the key community partnerships that the district has, and also to engage and develop a greater presence in the community by having the Dover School District participate in community events. Under the key district messages, you would be able to see that the focus is on faculty professional development, increasing an array and effectiveness of services and programs, promoting social emotional growth, being able to provide accessible and comparative data regarding student achievement and progress towards program and curriculum, and being able to developing the refinement of these programs to strengthen and student achievement. And then to increase the visibility of some of the key programs which have been mentioned in each of our meetings, the CTE, Tiger Rap, Welcome Center, a whole host of those. And then the new family services to communicate and connect families to help them become aware of the available social services, federal and state programs. So this would be for the parents and community to be able to see this on the website and to know that they can engage in any of these different areas, or to understand and ask questions of the building principal or teachers if they did have questions about any of these. And then the last one is the district and building level focus, in which we're going to continue to celebrate the faculty and staff accomplishments. And there's a section for crisis communication, college counseling, and as we discussed today, equity, to continue to look at communication strategy and practices with equity and inclusion lens to ensure full participation of our community in a district dialogue. So these are all very important messages for the community to understand that these are some of the focus areas, and this is obviously a living document that the administration would continue to focus in on in their planning and to be able to publicize for the community. Are there any questions with what I just presented?
I can't see everyone in order to give the floor. So is there, and thank you. Is there anyone that has comments or questions about community relations? Perfect, very thorough.
Well, I just have one more thing.
Mm-hmm.
Wanted to add to that particular piece is that Dr. McLaughlin provided statistics as they're trying to baseline the multimedia usage. So the Dover School District website hits on average, a monthly average, about 23,000 hits, and daily about 684 hits to the website. The homepage obviously is the one that has the most hits. The departments and news and announcements pages are most visited. The district Twitter tweets earned an average of 4K impressions per month from January to April. And the number of engagements include Twitter statistics also include the number of engagements, including the top tweets. So one of the things that I had to look up that I just wanted to define, because not everybody would know, is that impressions refers to the number of impressions on a tweet sent in a selected date range. And an impression is the number of times a tweet appears to users in either their timeline or search engines. And engagements is the total number of times a user interacted with tweets you sent during a selected date range. And the reason why this is important is that the district will be able to understand, you know, how they're engaging the public and what has been the most impactful mode of communication. So it's just something to look at, to baseline, to see, you know, how does our community respond to any of these social media outlets. And that's my report.
Thank you. That is the community's report. Thank you so much. Was there any stats for Facebook? I know that the district has a Facebook page and it really doesn't move a lot. Do you guys have any stats on that?
The statistics section of Facebook are broken, but they were broken when we tried to analyze them. So hopefully they will be repaired and we will update that when they are ready.
I'm a kind of anti-Twitter person, so I'm curious to see if Facebook has any other thing else. So great, thank you. All right, so Ms. Viveros, can you lead policy items, please, and update?
Thank you, Ms. Rosales. Good evening. The policy committee met on May 11th in person. I'll start with item number 1, which is one of 2 readings. Policy 3280, liability for student welfare. Item number 6 was added to this policy, addressing a teaching staff member may not assign students to activities from which the teacher receives monetary compensation or other benefits from enterprise outside the district employment. Policy 3281 and policy 4281, inappropriate staff conduct. This is for teaching staff members and support staff members. The wording has been added to indicate the reports are to be made in writing to the superintendent of school. Such reports will be made as soon as possible and no later than the same day as they have received the report. Policy 3321 and 4321, acceptable use of computer networks, computers, and resources by teaching staff members and support staff. This policy has been updated to change wording as devices instead of computers throughout the policy. Policy 3322 and 4322, staff members' use of personal cellular telephone, other communication devices. This is for teaching staff members and support staff. An additional paragraph has been added to this policy for additional clarification of when the phone can be used. Policy 3410, compensation for teaching staff members. This is a new policy which was recommended by Strauss Esme. This policy explains substitute teachers will be compensated by a per diem wage established annually by the board. If a substitute teacher is anticipated or is actually required for on a long-term position, they will be placed on a salary. This policy also explains summer school teachers will be compensated on the salary schedule negotiated for certified teachers. Policy 5337, service animals. This is a new policy which addresses service animals. I'll move on to item number 2, which is 1 reading, no changes. Policy 3324 and 4324, right of privacy for teaching staff members and support staff members. And policy 3370, teaching staff member tenure. Item number 3 are job descriptions. A new description was added for Dean of Students and also for Information Technology Help Desk Support Specialist. I also wanted to point out, it's not on our agenda, but we spoke about regulations. Regulation 3280, liability for student welfare. This regulation relates to our policy 3280. The regulation has the same paragraph added in as the policy related to a teaching staff member may not assign students to activities from which the teacher receives monetary compensation or other benefits. In Regulation 3281, inappropriate staff conduct. This regulation relates to policy 3281. Roles of investigators have been clarified and updated to reflect our current processes. I move that we approve item 1, 2, and 3.
Is there a second on that?
Second.
Ms. Nutting, thank you. Is there questions, comments about any of the policies? I just want to clarify that since 3280 and 3281 were not on the agenda, was that what you read, Ms. Viveros, the full description?
It's the
regulations. I'm sorry, the regulations were not on the agenda. Just to put it into the record, right? Was that the full description of them?
Yeah, the policies are in there as a first,
but not the regulations.
1 of 2 readings. It was just a regulation that is updated with that policy.
Great, thank you. Okay, no questions or comments. Mr. Minkowitz, may we have roll call, please?
Ms. Cateno?
I saw a yes. I didn't hear it, but I saw it.
Yes.
Got it.
Ms. Harabo?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Mullen?
Yes.
Ms. Nutting?
Yes.
Ms. Ruiz?
Yes.
Dr. Sainer?
Yes.
Ms. Viveros?
Yes.
Ms. Grisowitz?
Yes. Ms. Mullen, may you lead Finance and Facilities, please?
Yes, the Finance and Facilities Committee met on May 4th, and Dr. McLaughlin, Mr. Minkowitz, Carol Ruiz, Ms. Grisales, and Dr. Sainer were present. We talked about the facilities and the work that's being done. The science labs are moving ahead with further architecture, meeting with the group, and those final plans should be in soon for review and bidding. Let's see, work on the high school roof is almost ready to start. Plans have been submitted. It goes through the whole process. The beginning has been, bidding was updated, and it looks like it'll be moving forward, and it looks like the bid came in below our anticipated budget. And the HVAC systems in Eastover schools and Academy Street schools are in process. These projects are needed to meet the fresh air guidelines. Eastover's plans have been updated to include 2 new classrooms. And those final plans are being put in place and going through the steps for approval, and that work should be starting. Academy Street is at the beginning of stages. So the drawing, the bidding, all of those steps that you have to go to. But in the meantime, each of the classrooms have fresh air machines in them for student and staff safety. And on June 24th, the Dover High School asbestos project will be starting. I know one of the areas was our boardroom, and then some of the other areas, they're going to have that finally removed. And it should take about 2 weeks. So they're going to try to do it in the interim between the end of school and the beginning of the 5-week summer program. The fence around Hamilton Field has been fixed at no cost to the school, because it was the tree removal that hit the fence and they replaced it. So that was good. Finance, those topics were covered by Mr. Minkowitz. And then we talked about the benefits, and the health costs for employees is going up, slightly increased, and it looks like it's going to cost the district about $80,000 more next year. That's what the projection is. And then we also received hard copies of our demographic report, and it was completed. We briefly discussed the report. This demographic study projected grade by grade enrollments from next year through 25-26. And according to the analysis, we're already above capacity in a couple of our grade levels, pre-K through 6 and the high school 9 through 12. No, and that doesn't account for, that's the number of kids and number of, classrooms, I guess, seats. So that can be redistributed possibly. We talked about Mine Hill's anticipated expansion of apartments being built and some of the other projects that are moving ahead in Mine Hill. We talked about making class numbers at each grade level available to the board for a review. We had that, but now with the new system, those demographics are going to be reconfigured so that we can get a generated report at least a couple times a year, so we can see how many students are in each classroom for each grade. And we got our Title I, we got 5 new basic skills teacher out of our Title I funding this year, which is very positive. And I think that was it for the meeting. And now on to the motion. Motion to approve the following resolutions 1 through 11.
Thank you. Is there a second? Ms. Viveros, a second. Is there questions, comments? Yes, Ms. Mullen.
Okay. Going through that and going through the check registers and looking at the different areas of our spending, I had a question about our year-to-date, our projected what is our annual projection, which we approved at one of our budget meetings for legal services, and for last year it was $85,000, and we have well exceeded that this year. And I believe there's many reasons for that. I mean, we're in negotiations, we're in contracts with Mine Hill, there's a lot of areas, but we've exceeded that double of what we projected. So we'll see how things go next year, maybe a quieter year. And look, I had a question about our how much we had already paid Delaware Valley Regional High School to handle our technology, overseeing our technology in some of the areas and those things, which, you know, I got information back. We spent about $33,000 this year, but have done some major, they have supported some major areas of need for us that we would not have been able to do for ourselves. And we had not done for ourselves in past years, even with students, staff security and people getting in and out of the buildings. And the school security grant for $176,000, which is on this motion, has already been spent to bring us into compliance with the Liz law and bringing into compliance each of the school's emergency response systems, which we have been addressing and looking at for a while. So that's really good. It's really good. Emergency call systems, lockdowns, phones, to link everyone.
Great. Are there any other questions, comments? Okay, Mr. Minkowitz, will we have roll call, please?
Ms. Catano,
Yes.
Ms. Geraldo,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Ms. Mullen,
Yes.
Ms. Nutting,
Yes.
Ms. Ruiz,
Yes.
Dr. Sainer,
Yes.
Ms. Viveros,
Yes.
Ms. Grisales.
Yes. Okay. I believe informational, there was no use of facilities requested at this time. And old business, yes.
Just although there was no official facility request, we did receive a verbal request from the town to allow one of our fields at the high school to be used for children's soccer, which we have agreed to. So they are working on the dates. So the board may see at its June meeting, that may have already begun by the time you see that in the June meeting, but I wanted to just alert the board. I understand that field maybe about 10 years ago was used for youth soccer. And so we're reinitiating that at the request of the town.
That is amazing. I hope, I know the request came from the community. One of the reasons why I'm sitting here, because it's really important for us sad to see those fields sit there with webs, right, and not being used. So it's great. Thank you so much for that for our kids. And I can't wait to see recreation games again. Thank you. Old business, I just wanted to remind the board, as we have discussed in past meetings and past communication, board members are reminded of the importance of their role in evaluating the superintendent and the time-sensitive responses that is needed from each board member to comply with the statutory deadline of July 1st evaluation for our CSA, or our superintendent, in other words. Okay, any other old business? Nope. Okay, I have new business. Regarding Juneteenth celebration. I know that I did not receive any concerns regarding the discussion to happen here, so I'm looking forward to discussing what this would mean for us. As you all may already know, this Juneteenth will be celebrated as a New Jersey state holiday for the first time in our state. Ms. Reese is proposing that board members wear kente cloth face masks in recognition of this holiday in our June meeting in person. As you also may know, all board members received an email with information on Juneteenth and with and our commitment to learn about the celebration and its solemn remembrance of the event. If we are all in agreement this evening, Ms. Ruiz will provide us with the kente cloth, including administration and for Mr. Crute, donated by Wind of the Spirit. Would any board members provide us with their thoughts and or information learned from the information shared?
Ms. Grisales?
Yes, Ms. Ruiz.
I would just add that one source for more information about Juneteenth is a great PBS public broadcast system, PBS documentary on Juneteenth. And for those who are not already aware, the Emancipation Proclamation declared all enslaved people free on January 1st, 1863, but not all Black people gained their freedom then. And the last to recognize that freedom from slavery was Texas, and that declaration was made in Texas on June 19, hence the name Juneteenth, 1865, over 2 years later. And the kente cloth is it's a silk and cotton cloth made by the Ashanti people, who are some of the people that populate present day Ghana. Ghana is, for most of enslaved peoples in the Americas, was the last place on the continent of Africa where there were. There's a fort there, dungeon, that is called the Place of No Return. And the kente cloth is used both in celebration and in mourning for funerals, for weddings, for graduations. So because of that celebration and mourning, that's why the cloth is used during Juneteenth celebrations, because of course we mourn that history of slavery as we celebrate the liberation from slavery. And certainly there's plenty more to learn, but if our board, if our board committed to wearing kente cloth in celebration of the Juneteenth holiday, there would be a partner commitment to learn about the holiday and learn about the kente cloth. It's very important to wear kente cloth, recognizing its significance, and not just, it's not decoration, it's ceremonial.
Thank you. Thank you for getting those for us.
Great. It's great to receive very positive feedback, right? As much diversity as we can and inclusion, it's great to practice that and to be role models. Anyone else? Comments, questions? Good, great. Okay, we move forward to the public comment section. The board recognizes the value of public comment on educational issues and the importance of allowing members of the public to express themselves on school matters. To ensure fair and orderly expression of such comment, each statement shall be held to a time period of about 3 minutes. Public comments limited to items on this agenda should be entertained for approximately 30 minutes upon the discretion of the presiding officer. Since this is a virtual meeting occurring during the COVID-19 shutdown, public comment has been solicited through the Google form on the district website. Please understand that public comment portions of our agenda are not structured as question and answer sessions, but rather they are offered as opportunities to share your thoughts with the board. The board may or may not respond to public comments. However, all comments are considered and will be investigated and addressed as appropriate. Please be courteous and mindful of the rights of others when providing comments. Comments may not be abusive, obscene, threatening, or irrelevant. Please understand that students and employees have specific legal and privacy protections. The board is not permitted to respond in public to comments about students or employees. Please be advised that you are commenting on your own risk. At your own risk. Any public comments that are directed at a particular individual or individuals could subject you to legal liability of defamation. Is there any attendees with raised hands? Any attendees? I see. Yep, I see one. Mr. Antonio Acosta, if you could please be giving access to speak. Thank you. Good evening, Mr. Acosta.
Hi, good evening, members of the board. Hopefully you can hear me. Thank you for taking my call. Awesome. Antonio Acosta, 130 Madison Street in Dover, New Jersey. As I always start off the conversation, I really, truly, absolutely, without a doubt, unequivocally appreciate your service to the town, both paid and unpaid. And I know that everyone's working hard towards the common goal of really the best quality education and a great place to work for our staff. but I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, I don't continue to mention my disappointment that our school remains closed in a hybrid calendar. And 8 hours a week of in-school instruction just simply isn't good enough. And I wonder where or what is the data that you're looking at that's keeping our schools on a hybrid calendar. Respectfully, sir, when the school year started, you were very communicative on the COVID numbers in our community, explaining why we couldn't open up school. I believe there were 3 different letters that went out. And listen, the facts are the facts, so the numbers are the numbers. They were hard to dispute, hard to contest. I get it. But I feel like our children are continuing to have this scarlet letter on their sweater, and the data just isn't there to support what we're currently doing. If you visit the Morris County .gov, the coronavirus site, the rolling 7-day average for Dover is -2. It's actually going the other direction with potential misclassifications. And then you say, well, how about Victory Gardens? They're -1. Well, how about Mine Hills? 0. This is as of today data. And there are many towns that are higher than us. In fact, I'm looking at it right now. Mount Olive, Parsippany, Boonton, Washington Township, Chatham, other Boonton, Chatham, Mount Arlington, Florham Park, Hanover. All these communities had higher positivity rates in the last 7 days than Dover. If you review the official site of New Jersey, COVID-19, they have a dashboard. It's very interactive. I encourage you to go there. I'll certainly send you the link. In Dover, we have 65% of people over the age of 18 have received at least 1 shot. That's unbelievable. That's higher than the state average. And our most vulnerable population, who are 65 and older, 92% of Dover residents have received at least 1 shot. Again, both higher than the negative average. In Chester, 64%. In Mendham, 62. Florham Park, 64. And Harding, 53. Dover's higher. And all 4 of those communities, those schools are open 5 days a week. So I have to continue to ask, what data are we currently looking at that is driving this decision? Elementary students should be in school 5 days a week. Teachers have been vaccinated. Everyone wears a mask. Children are 5 feet apart, although that's not needed anymore by the CDC. Children have plexiglass dividers, although again, not needed by the CDC. We know that transmission rates are very low between students and a vaccinated teacher. It's fractional at best. And so if you sense frustration in my voice, if you sense passion, you are absolutely correct. I wish there were more parents calling so that we could be further along, but our schools shouldn't be closed anymore. And lastly, as my time remains, here's a few things my kids can't do. They can go to Buffalo Wild Wings and they can have a snack en masse. They can go to a jumpy house and have a birthday cake in the upstairs part en masse. They can go to a wedding ceremony en masse and have a dinner, but they can't, after 4 hours of sitting in that classroom, cannot have a snack in a plexiglass barrier. To me, is wrong, and we have to be able to adjust. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Acosta, for your comment. Any other comments? I see Ms. Lynn Laurie.
Can you hear me?
Yes, ma'am, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Good evening. I believe that was Mr. Acosta that just spoke. I hope he's still listening, because I would encourage him to run for the Board of Education, because he had an excellent question and an excellent comment. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you, Ms. Laurie. Yes, it is important for members of the community to run, to be part of this great volunteer work. And just to clarify, we are all volunteers here. No one gets paid from the board. Are there any other attendees that would like to make a comment? Okay, I see none raised hands. Mr. Minkowitz, are there comments in the Google form?
There are a couple of comments.
Would you please read them into record for us, please?
Yes. The first comment is from John Caniglio, 24 Taylortown Road, Montville. Thank you to the board and administrators for your gestures during Teacher Appreciation Week. Your thoughtfulness is very much appreciated. Our teaching staff has learned 2 new ways to teach this year. We have provided leeway to our students in submitting assignments, and we have done everything possible to make this learning environment a successful one for our community and for our students. We've never told our students no. At the last board meeting, nearly 40 staff members submitted public comments. That has never happened before. Unfortunately, many of the topics that were brought up have not been addressed. This is unfortunate. During a time when staff has been asked to be as flexible as ever with the student body, listening to the concerns of the staff is just as critical. Thank you. There's one more comment from Brad Gary, 9 Mechanic Street in Dover. Hello. Can the Board of Ed please discuss that there are relatives of employees that work in the district? Shouldn't all members of the community be given an even chance of employment instead of hiring your relatives for jobs? I am very concerned about this. Thank you for your time. That's all.
Perfect. Are there any administrators or board members that would like to address any of the comments?
Yes, I just want to, and I do thank, I know I've said this before, Mr. Acosta for his advocacy and for being a voice for inclusion of our students in schools. It's interesting when we hear statistics because many times they're different from the ones that we're hearing. In my most recent meeting with the township administrator, he was extremely concerned at the low level of vaccination in Dover. So what I had heard from him was that Dover was one of the lowest vaccinated towns with approximately 15%. So again, I'm not disputing the statistics that Mr. Acosta raised. I'm just indicating that I am hearing some different statistics. I also wanted to alert the public that we are twice a week updating our COVID dashboard for staff and student incidents. So since April the 12th, we have had 32 incidents. So then approximately a month time, about 32 of our own staff or students who have tested positive for COVID. So it does continue to remain a concern, although we are, as I mentioned in my report, consolidating our cohorts at the high school, still in a hybrid model, but more frequent than has been the case since April 12th.
Any other comments? Just wanted to remind the board and the public that if comments are not directly addressed here, it may be in relation to personnel matters, legal situations, things that are confidential. But please know that your comments are addressed as appropriate, and there should be a response at some level to your comments. If that is not occurring, please follow the chain of command so we can ensure that your comments are you feel valued in your comments, because your participation is important to us as board members. I also wanted to quickly remind, can I finish? Thank you. So wanted to remind the board that the role of us as board members, right, are being a body of policymaking and evaluators of the superintendent, as I mentioned in our old business. Running the district, personnel decisions and matters are not within the direct discretion of the board, but rather the primary duties of the superintendents. So it is a fine line that we walk here as volunteers of body policymaking. We may approve recommendations that administration provides to us, but sometimes we don't have a direct say in situations. So please know, and if you're interested in finding out, run for the Board of Ed. It's the best way to get to know what the Board of Education is, because there's a lot of behind the scenes things that I, as a public person, did not understand and now understand. And it's important that we do continue to advocate for our kids. Thank you. Ms. Reese.
Thank you. I just wanted to piggyback on Mr. Acosta's comment and Dr. McLaughlin's, and maybe Dr. McLaughlin has more accurate information than I do. It's my understanding that the town of Dover administration has several ideas and plans to ensure that those who wish to be vaccinated in our community can be at no cost and without documentation barriers. And one of those plans includes a vaccination clinic at St. John's Episcopal Church. That's at the big church on Blackwell Street, across from the big Methodist church on Blackwell Street, on May 20th. And for any community members who may not have a driver's license or other form of valid identification, it won't be a problem. That was a barrier for COVID tests at St. John's Episcopal Church. If you didn't have identification, sometimes cost is a barrier. From my understanding, with my conversations with our town administrator, there won't be any barrier to that May 20th clinic. And I share Mr. Acosta's hope that we will safely be in person for all school-related activities as soon as possible, and share Dr. McLaughlin's concern with different statistics and ensuring the value of life first. You know, our students can't learn if they're traumatized by the death of their loved ones, especially if it could have been prevented. And I just want to say, like, when we think about COVID, I remember this old saying about, you know, putting your umbrella keeps you dry in the rain. I'm totally messing up the saying, right? Your umbrella keeps you dry in the rain. So now you're dry, so you put it away because you don't need it anymore. But it's still raining. So, you know, maybe it's time to open up a little bit. But it is exactly the measures that our community has taken, the masks, the vaccines, the social distance, the remote learning, that has kept us where we are. So, you know, it's a difficult decision that I'm glad I don't have to make of, you know, these methods are working to help us get better. So stopping them, if they're working, may not be the logical decision right away, although it seems to be, right? Oh, we're better now, so put the protections away. And of course, I respect the decision of our health, our state and county and town and district administrators who do have to make those hard decisions. And I just wanted to kind of share those thoughts.
Thank you, Ms. Ruiz. Any other comments before we conclude? Dr. Sainer?
I apologize. This question is spurred by, it's Ms. Ruiz's fault. She made me think of, Dr. McLaughlin, you mentioned the Dover COVID dashboard, which I forgot existed and will check out in maybe about 5 minutes. But are any of those, I forget the number exactly, the 30 cases of staff and students in our school, are any of those known to be known to have occurred within our schools?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, if there are no further comments or questions, is there a motion to adjourn at 8:45?
Moved.
Mr. Miller and Ms. Viveros, are you interested in seconding that? Perfect. And all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Have a good evening and be safe, everyone.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.